Welcome to another Treece Talk. This is one of my favorite opportunities is to introduce somebody that we're working with instead of me just talking on about the economy, the markets, and interest rates and inflation. We have some fantastic allied professionals, and we have Michael Tobin from Tobin and Associates, who's actually right next door to our office, and he specializes in real estate transactions. He is an attorney. You've been an attorney for some 30 years. I think this is your 30th anniversary, if I'm not mistaken, since you passed the years go by.
Hard to believe.
I'm the same way. I'm like, it's been 30 years. We have some clients who we've referred to Michael because of real estate issues. And of course, that's a big part of our work in financial planning and estate planning. So Michael, we're really glad to have you here. Thank you for agreeing to do this. It's, hopefully we'll be able to send some people your way as well. And I want to really recommend to our viewers your fantastic website, so tobinlawyers.com. There is, of course, all the background information that you would want, but you do a great job on these little educational videos.
Thank you.
And I've looked at several of them, and that's what I want for what we're doing. We try to do some little educational resource videos, definitions or calculators, for financial planning and the things we do. So people have questions, and it's great to go there and say, well, what does this document mean, or what do I do in this situation? So thanks for joining us. And just to emphasize, of course, I want you to introduce yourself, but you specialize in the real estate transactions, property disputes, which we have on occasion, I guess, probate issues. You work with banks and agents, real estate agents, I guess, as well, disputes there, both residential and commercial.
Correct.
And most of our clients are residential, but we have had people with commercial properties as well. And so I'm going to, I guess, give some examples of some of the situations that come up that I guess to get your feedback on. We have people who inherit properties, and sometimes that leads to a dispute. And we try to plan this as much as possible to make sure that the properties are correctly titled, that they're named beneficiaries on things, or there's a trust. And some of the things we get are somebody inherits a property and there's a dispute as to what to do with that property. Somebody wants to own it, somebody wants to sell it, somebody wants to rent it out. Can you, I guess, give some maybe just general, obviously not specific advice, but some of the things that people should plan for in situations like that?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, first of all. I would say in terms of estate planning and real property, it's important to know, first of all, it's the decedent, the estate planner, the current owner who decides. Sometimes heirs get upset. There's nothing they really can do. It's everyone's right to dispose of their property as they see fit. So good estate planning will alleviate a lot of issues thereafter, but if we limit ourselves or kind of start with just the idea of homes in Florida, if it's somebody's homestead property, Florida treats homestead property differently than all other property. People should understand that. So if we're really talking about someone's primary asset, like their home, usually someone's biggest asset, if you're married, you cannot deed the house to anyone. Florida protects marriage and the sanctity of marriage. Same sex, different sex, all the same. As long as you're legally married, if you have a spouse, you cannot devise or give your homestead to someone else. The devise fails. If you have minor children, same thing. So, additionally, homestead property passes to heirs free of the claims of creditors. Just like you and I, if we own a property and it's our homestead and a judgment's entered against us, nobody can execute a judgment against homestead property. No other state has those same protections like Florida does.
But that's
So-
fantastic. I know that how strong the Florida is for asset protection for a homestead. You know, that's good to know. That's a consideration. That's the downside is divorce, and that's it. I go through all of these. Well, what are the benefits and what are the downsides? Obviously, you know, separating property if you get divorced. So what are some of the planning tools that people should do if they want to leave property and, you know, maybe they think that they will be creating a dispute between their children, for example. You know, maybe somebody's local, somebody's out of state, or they don't get along.
Sure. I would say that knowing the property and the heirs is the most important. If the property is the decedent's homestead and no one else lives there with them, then they can put in their will a directive to sell the property for their personal representative to sell the property and the proceeds be split. Or they can leave their personal representative executor the discretion to either pass it on to the heirs or sell it. I think that knowing, you know, the property and the heirs, you know, who's going to use it, what other assets do I have to maybe counter, you know, maybe I have significant additional assets, liquid, that I could leave the house to someone who's going to use it and leave comparable liquid assets to another heir. But the first thing you really need to do is, you know, decide who's going to need or use or want this property. You know, if there is someone, then I can deed it to them. I have to do it in my will. If it's homestead, I can do it so long as I don't have a spouse or minor children. Or I can decide maybe, you know, the house after I go, my children have homes, you know, I just want it sold and the proceeds to be split to my heirs.
Do you help, let's say, put together like not a deal, but something like that where a parent knows that they've got one child who's already lost a couple homes and are not going to be responsible, and so the directive is one idea to say this has to be sold and half the value goes to one child. Or do you suggest that they do something like a trust, a revocable living trust, and put instructions there?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends. You know, a revocable living trust is a good way to own the property, whereby, you know, you're avoiding the need for probate. You know, the property's already titled in the trust, you've named an additional or successor trustee, and then upon your death you have trust provisions for what should happen to the property. If you have heirs that you're not comfortable giving them the money, if they're going to be minors, then a trust is, you know, the appropriate vehicle to really put those restrictions and ages that maybe a minor would get the, you know, the proceeds. Minors can't own real property, so, you know, it's really, you know, from an estate planning standpoint, very, very specific, and that's why, you know, any estate planner will have a meeting first. You know, really, you know, it's incumbent upon the professional to really help elicit all the specific information for that person. But there are, you know, super simple things that you could do with regard to, you know, your primary residence. One is called an enhanced life estate, otherwise known as a ladybird deed. I think it was from Lady Bird Johnson, although I've heard countering views on that. But the idea behind an enhanced life estate is for a parent, primarily, to deed the property to themselves as life tenants, meaning it's theirs for life, with a remainder interest after they go, after they die, the property goes to their heirs. That avoids the need for probate. And the enhanced part, it used to be that you would just deed the property to your heirs as remaindermen, it's called, you know, and then you'd hold back a life estate. But over time, as people age and you want the flexibility, the enhanced life estate or the ladybird deed has become much more popular because it reserves for the life tenant, the parent generally, the power to revoke, the power to sell, the power to mortgage, the power to lease, to do anything with that property without having to go for permission. So that's become a real common tool.
So the parent still owns it, but they have then basically designated in a way like a beneficiary.
Correct.
But then they still have the right in the meantime to live there for the rest of their lives, or to sell it or mortgage it,
or revoke the deed of the remainder interest to the kids.
So that's another way to avoid probate.
Correct.
Just like with a trust.
Correct.
A very interesting strategy.
It's a simplified way, when a trust really isn't necessary.
And when all of these things, they really don't affect the homestead aspect, whether it's a ladybird deed or a revocable living trust.
You just have to, if you've deeded the property from yourself to your trust, or from yourself to through an enhanced life estate to your kids, you just need to reapply for homestead. Whenever you change the title, you're going to need to reapply for homestead. And the trust has to have the magic language allowing the property to be used for homestead, and then you'll have to show the county property appraiser that excerpt from the trust, and then yes, you'll be able to get the homestead benefits.
Is that something that somebody who's listens to that thinking, oh, I don't think I can do that correctly on myself, they would come to you and you would get it done, or somebody in your office?
Yes, as to doing the trust right. As to just the red tape of dealing with the property appraiser, most people can do that themselves.
Okay, you just tell them how to do it, give them the instructions. Okay.
You just go to, for filing homestead, which is crazy important, and shame on anyone who, is a citizen or a resident using the property as their primary homestead that doesn't have homestead exemption, because there's just too many benefits. But it's always done through the property appraiser of the county where the property is located.
Do you find that there are people who should have claimed homestead and really haven't?
There are definitely people. I mean, it may not be that many, but there's some for sure, that are just losing out on the benefits of it.
One of the things we deal with are people who are, when they retire, they sell their properties in South Florida typically, and often are going to other parts of Florida. And so there's some portability on the homestead, so the taxes are not going to be as high necessarily. I know there's a formula. So that's a huge loss. And then also the asset protection. If somebody's getting sued.
Yeah. Portability is a good thing that the state put into place. You can port or move up to $500,000 of capped savings. Basically the difference between what the county property appraiser is valuing the property and taxing it at. So if you sell your house that you've been in for many years and you have a huge capped savings, capped meaning by the homestead cap, you can take up to $500,000 of that to your new property. So if you buy a house for $1 million, it balloons to $3 million. And you have, let's say, $700,000 of cap savings, meaning you're saving roughly $14,000 a year, 2%. You can take $500,000 of that to the new house you buy. Let's say the new house is $1 million. You knock off $500,000 from the assessed value. Now you're getting taxed on $500,000 home.
That's hugely beneficial.
Yeah.
I always want my people who are doing that to know the time frames and how to do that. Real estate market, which has been so wild up and down, Miami, the bubble up and down. So I guess your thoughts on what's going on right now in the real estate market and closings and contracts and disputes.
It's been crazy. I mean, it really has been.
In Miami.
Yeah, I mean, it's really been, about 2 full years of craziness, where number of transactions, size of transactions, speed of transactions, it's just been nuts, but it really, it kind of relates to the financial world. It's just a matter of an amazing amount of capital being allocated to real estate. People buying homes, second homes, investment properties, timeshares. I mean, the real estate industry has gotten really good at sales. They've gotten really good at attracting private capital.
Plus the pandemic, that's changed things.
Pandemic changed, and freed up so many people to work remotely. Very, very, very high net worth people coming to Florida. Less regulation, less taxation, warm weather, receptive business client. I mean, it's just been crazy. Rates have been as low as you can imagine, and it just led to kind of a perfect storm of for Miami.
Do you see any downside coming, like disputes, that things were done too fast and loose and not due diligence, or like one of the title insurance? And I mean, people don't understand this generally. It's like, wow, I have to pay title insurance, and I mean, I guess we want to hear some like war stories or concerns about where we are or what may happen.
Okay, so generally as to the market, I think a lot of people want to equate what happened in '08 to what's going to happen, anytime there's a market run-up. That is not going to happen. There's not a lot of debt in the market relative to the amount of capital. In 2008 it was gouging debt. Now it's not. It's just tons and tons of capital. The debt is pretty manageable. So I don't think there'll be any type of crash like what happened in 2008. Could we have a situation where prices go down 20-25%? Absolutely. If demand slows, which it's showing signs of slowing, if rates continue up, as COVID hopefully, is more in the rearview mirror, you'll sort of return to a more of an equilibrium. If sellers still want to sell, which they generally do, there's always enough sellers, and properties sit on the market, prices will come down. But it's not going to be a crash. It's not going to be a debt crisis. In terms of title insurance is really the backbone of the real estate industry. It's what greases the wheels. It's what makes the train go. It gives lenders the comfort in knowing, that they have a good first lien and enables lenders to fund deals. It gives buyers peace of mind that they have good title to the property. Generally backed, almost always by public companies, these title insurance underwriters really are kind of the safety net of the industry.
You always hear these stories like theoretically you have title insurance because you buy a property and then some heir shows up and says, oh, you don't really own this property, this was left to me by my grandfather, or something.
Yeah,
do you have title insurance disputes like that?
Absolutely. It's not super commonplace. My former partner, when I had a partner for 20 years, did title insurance claims defense work. You'll have probate disputes, you'll have mortgage disputes, you'll have disputes over judgments, all types of disputes. And title insurance will provide you with an attorney to represent you at the underwriter's cost and will insure you up to the balance of your purchase price. So it's hugely important, and it absolutely can result in claims. Once in a while, the lenders require it. So once in a while, we'll have a cash buyer who won't want to pay, $4,000 or $5,000 in title insurance on $1 million purchase, and it's kind of so counterintuitive. With a loan, you've got 20-25% equity, and you're getting title insurance. Without a loan, you've got 100%, and you're not. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, because we had our previous guest was a professor at FIU on hurricane insurance, and he does all the modeling and the pricing that's used by the state of Florida and the insurance companies. And it's the same conclusion that for the value of a house, the insurance, even though it's an annual thing, it's worth it. And it's like anybody who doesn't have it, even though they've paid off the house, is taking on so much risk.
It's just the cost of ownership. It
Yeah.
really is, and that's the thing. So many people have gotten into real estate who really aren't, experienced in real estate. You don't ever want to use insurance in anything,
Right.
but we do live in Miami. We get hurricanes. Things happen. You need to be insured. You need to pay your taxes. You need to get insurance. You need to do maintenance. Those are just the three legs of property ownership.
We always think in our financial planning about what can go wrong, and in property, for example, I'll have somebody who's taking care of an elderly mother, and he's thinking, well, I'll buy the house and I'll move in with her. And I said, if you do something like that, it better be fair market value, or the other relatives are going to come in. And the thinking will be, well, no, I have a good relationship and I'm doing all this work and they appreciate it. But it's like maybe the spouse of your siblings who will raise it's like you have
You never know where the dispute is coming from.
you have to try to really think one or two steps ahead and make sure like all of these legal issues are planned for. So that's where we have you.
Yeah.
So on that note, we'll wrap it up. And Michael, thanks again.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun.
It's great for me to have you to be able to say, well, call Michael, because these disputes, of course the idea is to plan in advance
Right.
to avoid them.
Ideally, if you don't have to have a dispute, because the thing about disputes is, I'll just leave you with this, they're costlier, they're more time consuming, they're more stressful, they're more distracting than you ever could imagine. And people enter disputes and they want to fight until they're in it for a little bit. So the best you can avoid them, the better.
Yeah, that's good advice. We joke, no offense, but it's like the attorneys who make the money when it gets to be that much of a dispute.
We can make our money other ways.
Yeah, that's the best idea. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us on another Treece Talk, and thank you, Michael.
My
I appreciate
pleasure. Thank you.
your good work.